Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 243 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome back to the show. In this episode, we've got a very extra special guest. We asked Bruce Thom to come on. We're going to talk a little bit about not just bad actions, but the history of the company and maybe a little bit of statistical information that we were able to pull up and find on the internet. So ought to be a really great podcast. Really looking forward to having him coming on, talking about the two different lines of actions that they offer, both in the benchrest world and the hunting and tactical world. So without further ado, here we go. Before we get started, I would like to say thank you to a couple of our sponsors and advertisers. I'd like to say thank you to TriggerTech. TriggerTech is the maker of fine rifle triggers. They make a lot of different makes and models. We recommend them here for all of our custom rifles. We really like them a lot because not only do they have a great selection of triggers, but they also offer a great variety. They offer different shoot types. They offer different stages. But in my mind, are one of the safest triggers on the market, one of the easiest to install, and one of the easiest to adjust. So if you want to upgrade your shooting game and you like to do it with a rifle trigger, stop over to triggertech.com. That's triggertech.com today. We'd also like to thank MDT. MDT is the maker of fine rifle chassis, everything from the ACC Elite right down to the Oryx, which we think is the most unsung hero in shooting. So if you want to upgrade your rifle and you like to do it with a great modern day chassis with lots of great accessories, stop over to mdttac.com. That's mdttac.com today. So we invited Bruce on for a 15 to 20 minute interview, which of course that turned out to be a little over 2 to 3 times as long. We appreciated all the time he took out of his busy day, really diving into the bushes of what makes a great shooting rifle. What about gunsmithing and chambering, and what are clearances and tolerances, and why do they matter, and how do they really work? So if you're interested in getting into the bushes a little bit on why great receivers makes a great shooting rifle. So really excited to have Bruce come back on the podcast and talk about all these great subjects. So lots of great things to talk about and dive into. So without further ado, let's introduce Bruce Thom and welcome him back to the show. I'd like to welcome Bruce Thom, the owner of Bat Machine, onto the podcast again, and got lots of things that I want to talk to him about. Some of it to do with the different receivers and some different processes they go through. But before we do that, I want to see if I got some of my facts straight. So I'm going to go over a couple of things, maybe that the audience doesn't know, and then go back through and correct me on anything that might be off a little bit. So some history of Bruce Thom and Bat Machine. So according to my records, you built your first rifle in 1974, and this is all going to go somewhere. The company was officially founded in right around 91 and incorporated in 1996.
You're correct.
You do a lot of in-house. So a lot of your materials you take from raw process or raw materials to the finished process, which, we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. The other thing that I think is important to talk about is your philosophy behind not just your leadership, but your craftsmanship, maybe even your ethos and how you operate. So from my knowledge of you and how you operate, the values that you have on both meticulous craftsmanship over mass production and how that plays out in repeatable accuracy, in-house control and the importance of that. And then just some interesting facts that people might not know. So, for example, in benchrest, it is estimated that you have well over 100 world and national records that have been sent with your receivers since 1990. Also, almost every major record at 600 and 1,000 yard benchrest has been set with a bad action. And that both includes the majority of the official smallest groups as well as the aggregate groups. And then it is estimated that not just in F-class and benchrest, but also in ELR and all kinds of specialty records, in world major records set over time, it is estimated that there are well over 100 that have been set with bad actions. And although we can't get all of the records and all access to all of these things, I think that's a great place to lead off to say that when you talk about what you do, where you come from, and just the legacy of bad actions. So correct me anywhere that I'm wrong or anything that you want to add to all that.
I've never bothered to compile all those statistics, but I have no doubt that they're correct. The top 20, top 10 of any benchrest match is usually 90% bad actions. So when we entered the benchrest market seriously in '96, a little bit before '96 actually, but we were competing against Kelby's and Allen Hall, and I had worked on both of their actions as far as rebarreling for customers, and felt that there was improvements to be made, and from a toolmaker's perspective, and so that's where we came at it from the very beginning, and have continued to refine them. I would say that our actions are even better now than they were.
So your ethos or how you work, one of the things I think that's really important for people to know and understand is that there are those that are in our industry that try to make a difference or trying to find a way to improve something or make it better or leave a mark, or it's not getting into our industry just to make money. And when you look at scope manufacturers and all of the other manufacturers coming on the market, they're actually coming in from outside industries thinking that there's a piece of the industry that they can grab. But from my perspective, and then I'll let you chime in on it from there, is that there is a huge difference between those that are coming in our industry solely to make money and to put a product and try to take a portion of it, and those that have come into our industry thinking, hey, I can do something better and bring something better to market, something that I can't purchase.
Yeah, I won't speak for other manufacturers, but my perspective when I came into it wasn't planning on even being where we are today. But yeah, I was just trying to make an action that I was happy with, and just trying to make it the best it could be for benchrest and shooting small groups. And that's pretty much always been our guiding principle, is just continuing to tweak the basic design of a bolt action receiver. There's really not, I don't know, people come up with new ideas and whatever, but they're all pretty much the same. It's just a few details that can make a difference, do make a difference in ultimate accuracy that they're able to help the end user achieve. But most of it just comes down to the ability or the willingness to take the time to make them as square and round and true as possible, and then the firing pin assembly to make it to where it gives consistent ignition every time, action after action. That's where the long term, why we're still number one in benchrest and moving on into the hunter and long range hunting and ELR, PRS type shooting as well.
Now, for those that don't know, ultra premium action. Your background is in tool and die making. Your background is in really machining in worlds that, most of us hope to live up to. But what is your definition? Because you would be classified as not just premium, but maybe even ultra premium action. But what is an ultra premium action? What makes your action so much different from, you look at 30 rifles on the firing line that are custom rifles and all the actions look the same from the outside. It's really hard to explain to people what they're getting and what the difference is. So what is that? How do you explain that to somebody?
Yeah, and that is hard to quantify even for me, because I don't look at everybody else's action, and I don't have the opportunity to put barrels on everybody else's action and see where they fall short of. I just have to go off of what I know we hold for tolerance internally and what my customers tell me. And a lot of it has to do, well, it starts first of all with the internal tolerances we hold within the company on specific dimensions that make it easy for gunsmiths to make barrels time after time to the exact same headspace The lugs always touch. They don't need lapped. The face of the action is perfectly square to the lug abutments time after time. And that's the processes that we developed to do that and maintain that year after year after year. They're efficient processes, but you could argue that there's more efficient processes, but there are not more efficient processes that lead to the level of accuracy that we hold day in, day out. The last machinist I hired 5 years ago, he had worked in aerospace previous to this, and he thought he knew about tight tolerances. And he's told me multiple times, I've never had to do anything this close.
Right.
Day in, day out that he does now. And he said, yeah, he said, frankly, he said, for the first year, I was scared every time I was running part.
And how important, when you talk about accuracy, so let's leave all components out of the side, like barrels, the chamber job, the chassis scopes, all the other stuff. But what do you expect out of your actions? What are they capable of if everything else is put together? Like, what do you strive for? How do you measure that? And what type of tolerances, if you can share a little bit, do you hold, and how important, are they? I mean, when you're getting down that rabbit hole of those really tight tolerances, how important are they to the accuracy?
Well, the tight tolerances aren't, how do you want to say it? The tolerance is only important if everything else is right. So, like, we don't actually have a tolerance for the squareness of the receiver face to the lug abutment and receiver threads, because the way it's doing, there is no tolerance. It's perfect. There's really no way for it to be off. So say 2/10 plus or minus a tenth in squareness. The same on the bolt face to the lug abutments on the bolt. Same thing. They're virtually perfect, and that's with the half a tenth repeatability on our measuring equipment, that's what we see is, less than a tenth of variation in squareness. As far as the dimension of the head space, we say on our print that it's within 1,000. Internally, we're holding that stuff to half of that. So for head space, we're shooting for a half a thousandth tolerance on our head space dimension.
And that's plus or minus?
No, that's total.
That's total. So a quarter is what you try to do internally.
Yeah.
And that's so important for any type of barrel work or pre-fit barrel work or anything like. Now, what does that play out in accuracy? What do you shoot for with accuracy with your rifles? I mean, we got everything from ELR right down to the igniter. And I mean, what is your goals when you say I'm building an action? I know you're a shooter and a varmint hunter, but what do you look for? What is like the obsession? Where's the line?
Well, the action is manufactured with the intent that if you can get everything else right, the action will contribute to, what do you want to say? It won't add anything to what the rest of the rifle is capable of. So if the rifle's truly capable of shooting teen and zero groups as far as the rest of the components and the way they're put together, the action in our mind should not be the factor that's causing it to shoot larger than that.
That's reducing it, which would be something like, if I always say, like if you take a premium barrel like a Krieger or something like that, the barrel has a potential, let's just say quarter minute, just hypothetically that barrel, but that can be carried through to the finished rifle, or that can be destroyed in the process of making it. And so same thing with every part.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, and I don't want to run people down, but we see, even among so-called, quality smiths, we have repair work come back into the shop that the workmanship on like the barrel is really, really poor, and it's really quite disappointing. And those folks that are using that smith, or that smith had a bad day or whatever, that really is, they have seriously hampered their ability to get all they can out of the action, the barrel, and their stock system. It's really important to be very careful about who you have do your rifle work.
And,
It's different. There's people that they think they're doing quality work, but they've really maybe never seen quality work. That it's details. There's a lot of details. It's all in the action making the same thing. It's all details. It's not like it's rocket science, but there's a lot of details that have to be paid attention to.
and I always like the accepted, well, that's close enough mentality. And I always like it when people do something for production or they're banging stuff out. They're willing to compromise some of these areas in the quality part of it, and they feel like it doesn't make a difference, but in my world, it makes all the difference. Like, the only thing you can hope for is to do the best you can do and not negatively affect it, and you know that anything that you shortcut or speed up or you just don't maybe not know what you don't know, it takes away from the quality of the overall rifle.
Yeah, and it's not like especially with today's equipment in the CNC world, it's not like you have to go super slow, but you do have to understand what that machine's capable of and develop machining strategies that, optimize your end result. Obviously, on a manual machine, it takes a good bit of operator skill and experience to get premium results.
Which, if I can pause you there for just a second, if I can just interrupt, but most of your local gunsmiths are using manual machines.
Yeah, majority of them are. And a manual machine is not a hindrance.
It's not. No, it's not. But it takes a good driver.
Yeah.
And a good machine.
CNC machine is not the answer to everything. As far as doing barrel work, in my opinion, all it does is speed up your threading.
Right.
And
Horribly fast.
Yeah. If you higher quality threads than you're able to achieve on a manual machine, if, you're not using good threading tooling.
Right.
But yeah, you can screw up twice as fast on a
CNC. For sure. But
another factor you got to consider on a CNC machine that because you don't have the limitations of your hand-eye coordination like for threading, and you, depending on what type of system you decide to thread your barrels with, if you're one that offsets your muzzle to get the throat area straight or the whole chamber area straight, your muzzle can be running out quite a bit, and that can cause quite a bit of imbalance. And so you may actually not be getting the results you think you are if you're threading at 1500 RPM because the whole barrel is out of balance.
That is something that and maybe another discussion that I have learned. There's so much I have learned in the last 2 years that honestly I don't know if my brain can take any more knowledge, stuffing that stuff in there. But I was shocked and set back on how much that can, even in the micro measuring of things, that little bit of whip and vibration and the turning speeds can really play in it. I mean, I wouldn't have believed it till you start measuring it out.
Now that you mentioned, I remember you called. I'm having an issue with something, and you couldn't figure out what was going on.
It was driving me crazy. We kept getting this little bit of deflection, and you were like, "Well, just slow it down," and it took it right out. And I would have never thought that piece of steel and in that tight of a fitment with the bore liner was still whipping. That little bit was causing that deflection. It was sort of crazy. So yeah, I think every day my eyes get open to just other realms that you get into, and you're like, God, can this get any worse? So
yeah, it's details. It's all details. You get guys. There's plenty of good smiths out there, and they all have a big backlog. There's a reason.
Right. Yeah, if he's getting it to you the next day or the day after, you might be rolling the dice a little bit unless you really got a good hook up there. But and then the quality of the machines, I know like a lot of gunsmiths start out and they sometimes don't really pay attention or have the machines gone over to check to make sure everything's, aligned properly, make sure everything's working straight and true to each other. There's little stuff like that that are both expensive to do and sometimes, just stuff that has to be fixed to really get the best out of it too.
Yeah, used machine alignment it's definitely not for the faint of heart to tackle and get into to get everything correct. To be honest with you, I really don't recommend a guy that's trying to do quality work but even buy a used machine. I'm not a big fan of Precision Matthews, but they do build a quality machine. So you're better off to buy a new machine and spend more money to get something that's not all wore out and wonky to start with.
Yeah.
The Precision Matthews seem to be okay, and my favorite of current lathes that are available and that what I would consider gunsmith size is the Kingstons. They're a Taiwan-made machine, but they're really, really good quality and really good features for doing barrel work.
And what do they typically cost now? Just curiosity.
Well, local shop got a new Kingston a couple of years ago, fully tooled out with the DRO on. I think it was around a little over 20 grand.
Oh my gosh, that's not bad at all.
Yeah, it's a 17 by 40, 2.25 inch the hole, so it gives you lots of room to work on just about anything you'd want to work on.
Yeah. Well, on the action part, so let's discuss something that's commonly brought up and maybe misunderstood a little bit is the difference between clearances and tolerances and how that relates to, running the actions in the field. Because you often hear people say, or the uneducated that will put this out there, especially in the early years when you guys really started coming after or working a lot with getting into the tactical mark, getting into the hunting mark, which you've always done. But some of the other guys early on were like, well, you don't want to build your rifle with that ultra premium bat because they're benchrest actions and they won't work in the field. And we usually field that question, once a month, somebody's asking, hey, I read this online we talk about it here all the time with customers, but can you take a moment to explain the difference between tolerances and clearances and how that affects the field shooting of the receivers? Because you guys build stuff that goes even into ELR, which is getting coated in dirt all the time with the big breaks and everything that you're shooting. So for the person that might not understand all of this and why some of the areas are so important to accuracy, and then how you're able to get around that to keep it a field shooting receiver.
Yeah. So the difference between clearance and tolerance. Tolerance is the dimension that you're going to hold part after part. And it has nothing to do with clearance exactly, but it's just how when you measure 100 parts, 100 bat bolts, they're all going to be within, a few tenths of each other, maybe 5/10 total between 100 bolts, plus or minus 2/10. And that's bolt body diameter or head space or whatever, any dimension on it. So that's how close they're all going to be exactly the same.
And that's what you're talking about is tolerance, and that's the consistency part of it.
That's tolerance. And then you measure the bores of a bat receiver, take 100 of them, they're all going to be the same, like plus or minus 2/10 on the bore diameter. That's the dimension we're talking about here that people are concerned about for keeping their action running in dirty conditions. Clearance on our bolt body diameter is different between our benchrest series actions and our hunting tactical series actions. The benchrest actions have 1,000th to 1,000th and a half clearance, and the actions for repeaters, any of the repeaters, tactical hunting repeaters, they all have 2.5 to 3,000th clearance.
Now, just to ask you a quick question right there, why the difference? And then is that clearance total or is that per side?
No, that's total.
And so for the listener that doesn't understand, when you start talking about 1.5 clearance, you're talking about 3/4 of a thousandths clearance on both sides when the bolt's being run.
Yeah, that would be a loose one on a bench rest action. They're going to run closer to 1,000.
And then a half thou total over each side. Okay. And then on the tactical, you said 2.5 to 3?
Yeah.
And then that would be about 1.5 thou per side? But just so the listener can understand what that is.
Yep. No, you have it perfectly. So I personally have run our bench rest actions with varmint rifles since the very beginning, since the 90s. Bare stainless steel and steel action, not nitrided, not DLC coated or anything. And obviously you're shooting ground squirrels. I like to walk and shoot prone, usually off a bipod. So I'm, in the dirt, usually not too dusty, but there's always some dust. And I personally have never even had a problem with the thousandths clearance on a bolt. It takes a little bit of, wipe them off at the end of the day type of situation. But on all of our actions that are intended for hunting or repeater actions either have a nitrided bolt or nitrided receiver or both. And that makes a huge difference in how a receiver runs when it's dirty, because it gives a super hard shell on the bolt and on the receiver body that it really doesn't matter how much, I don't know. They just run. Orson Piper, that's been shooting the hammerhead since it first came out, I think he's ranked 5th in the nation after this last weekend. He sent me a message over the weekend just telling me, he says everybody was covering their actions up between stations to keep the dust out of them. He said, I decided not to, just to prove a point. And he didn't cover his action up all day, and then had his squad that he was shooting with run his action at the end of the day, and they couldn't believe that it was still ran just like smoother than hot butter. Just between the consistency of the bore diameter and the finishes, in addition to the nitriding, they are not at all going to lock up on you or have an issue.
And he shoots PRS, so everybody knows. The original BTAs, I think, were like 2011 or 12, and I think they even, I'm not sure, but I think they had a little bit tighter clearances. Those are the ones that we shot in matches in the earlier years, and we would run a 3-day sniper match. And I used to tell people all the time, like, as soon as they get a chance to actually use a bat, like get your hands on one, it totally changes your mind on what they are, because you can handle, like, we have a long range shooting school here, and I'm not trying to, this isn't a throw out to Bruce. Yes, we use all the bat actions here for lots of different reasons, not just this, but a lot of people have never really even touched a bat. And so when they get their hands on it and they're like, oh my God, and then you just see them start working a bolt. But we run 3-day early field sniper matches, no problem at all, and never really had any issues. But I want to go back and ask you 2 questions. When you start talking about binding and you start talking, like, a lot of these actions, you'll hear people say, I'm not throwing any brands out there, but they don't always all feel the same, or you'll get some, like, we start closing in about 3/4 of the way, you feel it bind a little bit or just stick. But, having a super smooth and super fast running action isn't about having bigger clearances. And so I'll double down on that and say that there's a lot of custom action makers out there that say that they hold 3 thou or 3.5 thou tolerance, but what they don't tell you, that's per side. That's not a good thing. Having too much clearance allows the bolt to kick sideways and start to bind up. And then also, to double down on that, sometimes they have to do that because the bolts or the receivers themselves can warp in the processes of them machining them, depending on where they heat treat and what process they machine. And so they have to open these things up extremely large, sacrificing what my mind would be a little bit of the quality of the shooting of the rifle to compensate for these. So I think the common misconception is more clearances means it's going to run better. And actually it's quite the opposite if you get too much clearance. And then also, if you can dive into just how important it is to have those areas straight and true and how they can cause even more issues with actions that just sort of, you hear them say they feel different. You get 3 different actions from the same manufacturer and you run all 3. They don't feel the same. You can sometimes feel them catch or pull a little bit in spots. So I know it's 2 or 3 questions in one, but can you address that and the difference in all of that?
Well, I'm not, like I say, I'm not aware of what other action manufacturers do for dimensions, but you are correct. The looser you get, the more possibility you have for things to go sideways or maybe get bound up just because of how loose they are. It kind of depends on, where they loosen it up and where, if everything is the same looseness, so it can, or one area has less clearance than another, can cause binding. But the biggest issue with getting too loose on a Remington style 2-lug bolt with a Remington style firing control system and trigger is that the more you have clearance, the more the bolt lifts up in the back end when it's cocked, thereby causing the top lug to not be in contact with the receiver abutment inside the receiver, because the bolt's actually tilted. So the more clearance there is, the worse that is.
And that has a direct effect on accuracy.
Yeah, it tends to, because it causes strange vibrations as the lug slams into contact, as the pressure builds from the, when the cartridge goes off. The bolt face is going to push it into contact, but it's going to cause it to. It doesn't always do it consistently, so it causes funny vibrations. So it's not a great idea to have a lot of clearance. That's like Jim Borden. I don't know if he still does it, but when he first came out with his action to allow a bolt that would, just part of what you said about receivers not being perfectly straight and you need some clearance for them to operate. When he was first trying to get it figured out, to get a smooth running bolt and minimal clearance, he developed and patented, I believe, what he called the Borden bumps. Made a swelled area at the back under the rear receiver bridge to keep the bolt centered and help keep the lugs in contact. So it's a good idea. Definitely works. But I chose to just actually make the receiver straight.
And then how about the warpage and the perfect straight receiver, the hole inside, and the perfectly straight bolt? I know what really led me to you guys was the fact that, so this is a true story. I was building rifles. I was actually sleeving Remington 700s to take up the Bolt Bore Raceway. And I was actually then sort of polishing them a little out of round. So it sort of created the Borden bumps on lockup. And then I was making sure to have perfect contact on the lugs. But we would get custom receivers, and I would always check on the contact of the lugs. And I can't tell you how many I would actually be like, it's back in the day, $1,300, $1,500 receiver. And here I am lapping the lugs because I know it's not going to shoot the best because there's no contact on the front lug, on the top when it's in lockup. And I have done that so many times, and I thought, I am not doing this no more. So what action can we seek out that, here I am fixing for free a $1,700 or $1,500 or $1,300 quote unquote custom action that a customer sent me. And then I've got all the risk because I'm modifying it.
Yeah. So then you started using bat.
Then we started using bat. So yeah, we had a couple come in because we do have a fair amount of benchrest crowds in Pennsylvania that we got the chance to chamber. And I remember specifically my dad standing behind me, and all I kept hearing was like click, 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 click. He was opening and closing the bolt. And of course we always seen him in matches because we shot a lot of varmint hunting matches and stuff here in the early days. But finally I had to turn around and tell my dad, like, you got to stop playing with that because you're going to wear it out. Like, what are you doing? And he goes, you see how smooth this is? And it was going click, 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 click. He's just kept working the action back and forth. So that led to, reaching out to Daryl and asking if we could purchase some of the receivers directly, and then how we could bring them into the for what we shot with like the earlier sniper matches, and sort of opened that door up to that conversation there. But yeah, it was, I'll never forget it. My dad standing behind me. It was like a little kid asking if we were there yet. And I know he'll listen to this podcast and he'll laugh, but I had to finally, I'm like, Dad, you got to stop playing with that. It was like, after about 20 minutes of it, he's, that's really amazing. And then click, 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 click. It would go again back and forth. It was hilarious. But yeah, I mean, you guys have really nailed it on all of that. But how about the importance of the heat treat and how you guys approach your process? Just real quick, and I know we went way over on the interview, but how important is it to not have, I mean, you can do all this perfect machining, but if you heat treat or do different processes at different times, you can take away some of the quality of the concentricity of that whole.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure most of the top action manufacturers that we're all heat treating our material before we start machining on it. We've always done that. But it's not just that, because material does move as you machine it. So to make our receivers be the way they are requires additional machining steps after all the machining is done to make that bore, guarantee that bore is perfectly uniform in diameter and square to the receiver threads. It starts out that way, but when you start taking big chunks out of ports and tang cuts, things can move. I mean, they're not moving a lot, but when you're trying to achieve 1,000 clearance total on a bolt, it has to be perfect, or you won't have, 100% lug contact, because the bore will be slightly out of round or pushing on one side. The bolt may fit, but it may not be actually, maybe pushed one side or the other. So yeah, we've always done, and we've improved our final operation. We used to still have a custom diamond honing machine that had custom tooling made that we run through the receiver to uniform the bore diameter, guarantee it was square to the front end. We no longer use that. We've come up with an even better system now that gives us better results.
If someone were to come up to you, what would be your 1 or 2 minute response when somebody's saying, hey, I read on the internet, and that's where it always starts, that, you don't want bench rest actions in the field. And, you already answered the fact you actually make 2 different setups, but
should we go Trump here? Fake news.
There we go. That was even a better, shorter response, right? Yeah, and this stuff lives forever. And I think it was sort of a way to sort of maybe, I don't know if you're using the right word, but downtrodden you guys a little bit that, well, you don't want their action,
Yeah, I get it. People are spending a lot of money. They don't want to buy the wrong thing for their application. But yeah, that's people that are telling you that bat doesn't work well, and PRS, NRL, any of that kind of shooting are just blowing smoke up your skirt.
And as far as the 2 different actions, they are built specifically different for those applications as well.
Yep. If you're hunting rifle, PRS rifle, NRL rifle, ELR rifle, any of our repeating actions are built to where they'll run in any condition you can put them in.
I know we tested a lot of it here when we first started. I was throwing powder bow rosin into the receiver. And then the first big sniper match I competed with, I made a commitment that I wasn't going to wipe the receiver down. And we shot, rain, dirt. It was at the Allegheny Sniper Challenge. But, my best advice would probably be, you've got to get one in your hands. I mean, if you can see one on a firing line somewhere, ask around to see who has one. I think the best thing you could do is actually ask somebody to run the action, and ask somebody that actually owns one, that actually shoots one, what they really think about it and how it works. I think that's half the battle. Is just not a lot of people have actually ever handled a bat.
Yeah, and it is, we've stayed relatively small, especially in the repeating type, hunting tactical type market compared to other people in that game. We spread our production out over extreme long range bench rest, 50 caliber actions, all the way down to small ones that'll handle a 22 Hornet and bench rest. Or, I mean, nobody shoots a Hornet and bench rest, but Varma Hunter. So yeah, we make a large variety of actions for many disciplines, and it somewhat limits our output doing that, and just the overall quality we hold. We don't have any desire to be the biggest in corner, take everybody else out of the market. It's just that there's only so much volume we can put out and maintain the really close tolerances that we do. And I refuse to go through the headaches of trying to hold those tolerances and go bigger. You can only do so much with a CMM in the quality control department. It takes people to maintain the level of quality we have for the last, next year will be 30 years.
So before we wrap up the podcast, do you have anything that you would like to talk about, or anything that you would like to, just as a parting shot, is anything new going on at Bat Machine, or new products you guys are working on, or anything that you wanted to give a shout out to before we call the end of the podcast?
Not really. We're always messed around with new stuff, but it takes us a while to get it into production to our satisfaction. The hammerhead, if you are looking for tactical PRS action or a hunting action that you don't worry about the physical weight, you definitely need to take a look at one of them. We're really happy with that. The 75-degree bolt lift is, in today's world of large diameter scopes with big knobs on them, it really makes running your action a real pleasure to have that little bit shorter bolt lift. So yeah, and we've gone to 75-degree bolt lift on our Bumblebee and Vampire, and the hunting actions that Unknown Munitions has available, the Vesper series, the short, medium, and long. The short has the 75-degree bolt throw. We're still 90-degree on the long actions. They have a different lug configuration, larger lugs for better performance with 338 Lapua size cases.
And on the Vesper, which we have built a lot of hunting rifles on, is like an ultra lightweight version of almost like the tactical receiver. Just a lot. It's still built in recoil lug, still built in pick rail, just a lot of weight relief. But thank you, Bruce, for taking the time to come on. We really appreciate it. You guys take care out there.
All right. You too, Jamie.
Well, the interview was a little longer than normal. I know every time I get him on the phone, I say I need 5 minutes, and 15 minutes later, he's still gracious enough to be spending time speaking with me. We have and exclusively built on Bat Actions for more than 20 years. They are a great receiver. There's so many reasons why we talk a little bit about here that are important to us, not just the consistency, the quality, and the accuracy. There's a lot more to making a great receiver. And then, of course, kudos to Bruce for staying in his lane and focusing on built-in quality and not quantity, and trying to ramp up and beat everybody into existence. They know where they fit. They know what they're trying to do. They know their mission. And they do a great job of not only making a great receiver and still making it at scale that we can actually build on them and have them here in a decent amount of time, but never sacrificing the quality and the expectations of the accuracy of what they're looking when the receiver is given to a machinist that knows what they're doing and putting it in the proper hands and putting it together properly as well. So thanks, Bruce, for taking the time to come on. I would like to say thank you to our last sponsor and advertiser, Krieger Barrels. Now, Krieger is a family-owned and operated business. They make cut rifle barrels out of the great state of Wisconsin. We have been using, like Bat Machine's actions, Krieger's here, and mostly exclusively, with the exception of a couple of small odds and ends that we'll bring in, for all of our custom rifles. And it's just the consistency and the quality of the barrels. It's just as important as the action when making that selection. And of course, there's a million people making barrels, but there's several reasons why Krieger always winds up on top. So if you want to upgrade your rifle and you'd like to do it with a Krieger barrel, they have in-stock inventory that they post up regularly, as well as their new program called Krieger Direct, where they try to put barrels up on a regular basis in different categories that you can purchase and hopefully get your rifle barrel in a short period of time. But if you want the best and you need it now, you can stop over to Krieger Barrels or order any of their custom options as well. Again, one of the best barrel makers in the world. We don't invite anyone to advertise on our podcast products that we don't believe in and use, and Krieger really has that covered. So thank you, Krieger Barrels, and you can look at their fine selection at KriegerBarrels.com. That's KriegerBarrels.com today. So diving into a couple updates real quick, the long-range shooting school for 2026 is starting to fill up. We offer our early bird special, so we take $50 off as our way of saying thank you. That goes through December 31st, but we are getting classes actually filling and topping off. Last year, all of our classes filled before the end of the year, so thank you everybody who has attended this year. And we're looking forward to having everybody registering and attending the class next year. We are limited classes to about 11, I think, is what we put up total. So super excited to have everybody come through. Just stop over to Wolf Precision. You can actually register online. And of course, classes are limited to 5 students a class. So like everything else that we do here, we focus on quality. We focus on providing the education and being able to spend the time with each and every customer, addressing the things that they came here to learn. And this class we just finished up last week was no exception. Super great crew, super great shooting. A lot of fun to have them here. And of course, we're one of the oldest long-range shooting schools in the country. So if you'd like to join us in person, you can register now at wolfprecision.net. And don't forget, we have our online long-range shooting school. It is through Patreon. It is at a fraction of the cost. It is a monthly fee. So you can sign up, take classes for 3 months, unsign up, and then wait for new content to come out, which includes our new reloading classes. They are getting ready to repost up with all of our range work that we're doing now. And then, of course, coming this fall is our prosumer gunsmithing school. So whether you own a custom rifle built by us or would like to learn more about taking care of your own rifle, we will have the online prosumer gunsmithing school posting up as well. And that is all covered under the umbrella we call the Wolf Pack. Now, the Wolf Pack is an online educational resource by Wolf Precision that's covering all the great subjects that we spend all the time talking about here on the podcast, as well as in person, or when customers call in and ask, hey, I got a quick question. Could you help me out? That is what that resource is for there. It's $49 a month and it includes all of it. So if you'd like to learn more about the Wolfpack or you'd like to subscribe, you can go to wolfprecision.net, click on Wolfpack, and register through Patreon. So thank you everybody for taking the time to join us. I really appreciate it. This is a great interview. I really appreciate again Bruce coming on and talking about the actions. I think never ceases to amaze me, and I have to get out there and visit again soon. That every time I go out there, I'm just fascinated on the processes and the quality that they focus on, and it really makes a difference in a rifle. So if you're building a custom rifle, why not take that extra step and getting a real premium receiver to finish that rifle off? It makes the difference. And then with our ACE system, when he was talking about head spacing, how important that is to being able to repeatedly give a customer ACE in different calibers and let them install them, uninstall them, change them. That is super, super important when as we grow or as we scale or as we keep offering these new products for our customers too. So if you want to learn more about Bat Machine, you can stop over to Bat Machine's website. And of course, we really appreciate everybody stopping by the podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, you'd like to share it, we really appreciate that. It means a lot to us here on our ratings. If you'd like to leave a comment down below or have any questions, please feel free to email us as well at contact@wolfprecision.net. So thank you everybody for taking the time to join us here. My name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host, and you're listening to Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.